He lost his wife and child on the same rainy afternoon. One phone call. One siren. One white sheet covering two small bodies. His life, once as calm as a still lake, shattered into thousands of pieces within hours. No more laughter in the house. No one waiting for him to come home. He didn't cry. He just sat in silence, watching time pass like a stranger to his own life. He couldn't quite remember how far he fell after that fateful phone call. Sounds became distant, unfamiliar. The world seemed frozen as he stepped into the hospital's cold morgue, where two familiar bodies lay still beneath white sheets. His wife, the partner of 10 years, the woman who always smiled gently every morning, was now motionless, her face still streaked with raindrops. His daughter, the 8-year-old who loved pigtails and doodling funny cats on the walls, was curled up in her mother's arms. As if the two had chosen to leave together, in their final sleep. The funeral was quick, simple. He didn't want flowers. He didn't want comfort. Words of sympathy felt meaningless. People said time would ease the pain, but how could time fill the void of a missing hug, or bring back the sound of a little voice calling, "Daddy?" Every night, he woke in the dark, reaching out beside him only to touch cold emptiness. Every corner of the house held memories. The tiny cup she used. The shirt his wife left draped over a chair. The half-finished book still lying open on the table. Friends told him to stay strong. But they didn't understand. Strong for what, when everything that once gave life meaning was gone? He started pulling away, from people, from everything. He turned off his phone. Quit his job. Out on the street, he watched others laughing, moving forward, as if the world had no idea of the weight he carried inside. Every rainy afternoon, he sat motionless by the window, watching raindrops trace lines down the glass. He thought about joining them. Not because he was weak, but because there was no longer a reason to stay. But then, in the deepest pit of his despair, something small, almost insignificant, happened. And that small thing, later on, became the reason he didn't let go. After 40 days of drifting like a shadow through the shell of his own home, he locked the door, got in his car, and drove, with no destination. He didn't bring much, just a small backpack, an old family photo, and a blank notebook he'd never written in. The city slowly faded behind him, along with the suffocating memories. He didn't know what he was looking for, maybe silence, or a place where grief wouldn't echo with every step. He passed through many places, quiet towns nestled in the hills, forgotten villages no one ever mentioned. He stayed in cheap motels, slept under strangers' porches, sometimes even on park benches. Each morning, he woke with no one to text, no plans for the day. He just walked as if going far enough might somehow leave the pain behind. Along the way, he met people. An old street vendor who had lost her son in the war but still smiled warmly at each customer. A one-armed mechanic working off the highway, who'd lost his entire family in a flash flood. A mute boy from the mountains who drew nothing but circles inside circles, but whose eyes shone like they held the sky. These people didn't speak much, but in their quiet strength and resilience, he began to rediscover something he thought he'd lost. Life. One night, beside the fire of a mountain villager, he opened the notebook for the first time. He didn't write a word, just slipped the family photo between two blank pages. He stared at it for a long time. Then closed the book. In that moment, something shifted inside him, vague, but real. It wasn't the end of pain. But for the first time, he felt like he could breathe, even while carrying the loss. And that was the first step back to being human. That morning, he woke on a mist-covered hillside. Birdsong echoed through the quiet forest, dew clung to his hair, and the cold wind stung his face. And for the first time in months, he felt truly alive. No more restless dreams calling out to his wife and child. No more crushing weight when he opened his eyes. Just him, the cold earth, and a sky he hadn't really looked at in years. He sat for hours at the edge of a cliff, watching clouds drift past at eye level. In that stillness, he remembered her gaze the last time he saw her. Not panicked, not afraid, just full of unconditional love. As if she already knew she had to go first. He remembered his little girl. Asking once with innocent curiosity, "If I disappeared tomorrow, would you miss me?" Back then, he had only laughed. Now, in his heart, he whispered, "I'd miss you every minute." One afternoon, in a small mountainside temple, he met an old monk. There were no questions, no conversation. Just a cup of hot tea. They sat together in silence for nearly an hour. As he stood to leave, the monk simply said, "Pain doesn't disappear. It stays to remind you that you once loved." The words cut through the heavy armor of grief he'd wrapped around himself. He realized, all this time, he'd been trying to forget. But memories aren't meant to be erased. They are proof of love. And if love still exists, then life does, too. That night, he opened his notebook. On the first page, he wrote, "My love. Today I looked at the sky and saw both of you. Not as wounds. As light. As the reason I keep going." For the first time in all those months, he cried. Not from pain, but because he could still feel. And those tears, they were the first step toward awakening. After months of wandering, he returned to the city on a soft, sunlit afternoon. The old house was still there, silent, closed off, like the man he once was. When he opened the door, the air inside was thick with dampness, laced with something achingly familiar. The scent of her hair. The faint trace of his child's milk. He stood for a long time at the threshold, hand resting on the wall. The spot where his daughter had once drawn a crooked little cat and made him promise. Never erase it. This time, he didn't turn away. He began to clean, gently touching each item as if whispering a quiet hello. A shirt. Tiny slippers. A photo frame. An old stuffed bear. Each one squeezed his heart. But no longer with searing pain. It was something different now. A quieter kind of peace. As if he'd been granted permission to remember. Without the fear of breaking apart. He spent a whole day tidying up his daughter's room. He didn't erase her presence, only cleaned around it. On her desk, he placed the comic book she had left unfinished. And beneath it, a handwritten note. "Daddy will read the rest for you." His friends were surprised to see him return. Not the same man, haunted and hollow. But someone quieter, steadier. With a light that wasn't loud, but unmistakably there. He didn't speak much. Just offered a smile, a nod. And slowly, he reconnected. Took a part-time job. Joined small community gatherings. Showed up not as someone who had all the answers, but as someone learning to walk again. Sometimes, when family came up in conversation, his chest still ached. But he no longer turned away. He knew they were still with him. In every breath. In every dream. In the way he chose to live, from now on. Coming back, for him, wasn't about returning to the past. It was about learning to stand inside the memory. Not to drown in it, but to let it hold him steady. His life after returning wasn't loud, nor hurried. Each morning, he brewed a pot of tea, opened the window to let the sunlight in, and let his heart move slowly with the rhythm of a new day. The old house had become something different now. No longer a prison for grief, but a quiet space where memories could be laid down gently. Like dried flowers pressed between the pages of an old book. He began to write. Not for publishing, not for anyone else to read, but simply to hold on to each memory, each feeling, each unfinished dream of his wife and child. He called it the journal of those who loved and still love. Some nights, he wrote until late. Other days, only a single line. Today, Daddy lived well. In the afternoons, he visited a small center for children who had lost loved ones. At first, he said nothing, just sat beside them in silence. But slowly, he began to tell little stories. About a girl who loved to draw cats. And a forgetful mother who always left the milk carton open. The children didn't ask many questions. But often, they'd lean against him. As if they could feel something warm in him, something that didn't need to be spoken. He also started planting. In the yard where his daughter used to ride her bike, a row of purple bougainvillea now bloomed. When the wind passed through, the petals danced lightly, like whispers. And he believed, somehow, his wife and daughter were watching from somewhere far away, smiling quietly. He wasn't trying to replace the past, nor to forget it. He was learning to live with it, to carry the memory as a part of himself. Sometimes he still cried, but the tears no longer drowned him. They watered the days ahead. He had once lost his entire world in a single day. But now, from the wreckage, he was building a new one. Not perfect, but real. And enough for him to go on living. One afternoon, as sunlight slanted through the window, he sat at his desk, hand resting on a notebook now full of words. He looked up at the sky and smiled gently. No more resentment. No more why. Only gratitude. For the days that had once been full of joy. And for the quiet gift of still being able to breathe. To walk. To love, though in a different way. He knew he would never be completely healed. But he also understood. We don't have to be whole to keep living. We only need the courage to hold our wounds close. And move forward slowly. Truthfully. To anyone who is hurting. If you are drowning in loss, please don't rush to escape it. Let yourself hurt. Let yourself cry. But don't give up. Pain doesn't stay forever. It changes. Into memory. Into strength. Into a love so deep no one can take it away. Because sometimes, just the simple act of breathing means you still have a way toward the light.